It is Sunday, March 13th, and we just had a very unusual morning at the Shala. And I wanted to narrate it a little bit in case a few of you, like, what just happened? About one of many small occurrences that just went down. And also to take responsibility for completely dropping the ball and not even knowing that it was daylight savings today. And that was the first event in a cascade of strange things that happened this morning because when we got to the Shala, I had not changed the thermostat program, so it was probably in the low 60s. It was a very cold morning in Ann Arbor today. It snowed a lot while I was in the Shala. I just got out. And so the fact that I hadn't changed the thermostat meant that when we got into practice, it was really like borderline dangerously cold to be doing what we do. And so we responded by increasing the speed of the vinyasa count and taking additional Surya Namaskar as well, just to create heat in the body and also kind of compress the concentration, maybe even compress the sense of time a little bit. And there's this whole chapter in the Yoga Sutras. It's about the secret powers, and you always want to be super careful about that because the ego hears secret powers of like, oh, right, and that's the fastest way to like veer off any spiritual path into the realm of pure ego is to go about trying to turn yourself into like a superhero or something. At the same time, I do think that that's a huge piece of the practice because subjective experience changes so much when we alter the conditions of our meditation. And, that's really what the yogic science is about, is the science of subjective experience. And so even if there's not literal changes in clock time, which I'll just leave that out of the domain of inquiry, still a major change in the subjectivity when I increase the speed of the vinyasa count just by it's maybe a like 20% margin. The energy becomes more concentrated as a result of the fast movement. There's more heat in the body. The whole experience feels a whole lot different. And looks like today it was also very nice. And I would love to have more feedback on that. It seems like this is a moment in a real cold spring with the possibility of increasing the sort of fire inside of the practice to good effect. It wouldn't have occurred to me otherwise. In any case, this morning with the faster practice, for those who did figure out that it was daylight savings, despite my not sending a memo, was it created this opportunity to really highlight one of the things I love about the vinyasa count. I don't know if you know how big of a fan I am of this incredibly arbitrary, syncretic methodology that is the counted vinyasa practice. I just think there's so much there that illuminates the nature of the practice. And this is one of many such things. So in the counted practice, the person who's guiding is the DJ. They are not the drill sergeant. And this is because there's a sense of receptivity and just a kind of gentle guiding that you're doing when you're counting. You're not the one who's trying to make things happen. And the way that shows up in the pacing of the count is that the correct method is to wait until in every state of every asana, exactly half of the practitioners in the class are ready to move into the asana before you count one. So let me illustrate the point here. let's use Marichasana as an example. The vinyasa into the posture is Sapta jump. And then it might take a minute to do all the things you got to do with your limbs to be ready to take Ashtau, exhale into the state of the asana. It's not quite so apparent that there's this bump in the rhythm when it's a little slower count. When the count gets pretty fast, like it did today, it's like, oh, she's like hitting the brakes for a minute, right? So it's Sapta jump. I'm watching to see when exactly half of the practitioners are ready to go. And then I say, Ashtau, exhale, right? So the feedback for you is like, oh, I'm waiting to do Ashtau, exhale forever. It just means that you're moving a little faster than the whole, right? And if I'm already counting Ashtau, exhale, and you're figuring out your way into the asana, that's just information that you're a hair behind the collectivity. Doesn't matter either way. There's just this gentle sort of nudge that's happening. Let's look again, Marichasana D. So the vinyasa there is Supta jump, and the next thing that happens is the breath count. So there's a lot of things that need to move, a lot of joints that need to rotate, right? Lots when you count all of the joints of your spine to move into Marichasana D. And so again, it's like we're going to pause time and sort of manipulate the subjective experience of time by just being like, Supta. And then when exactly half the people are in is when I say 1, right? So the idea is not to push or pull or use the count in a forceful way. It's to be like, hey, what is the reflection of the group experience, and what's the use of language in this moment that can actually draw slightly more into this really profound experience of the rapport that happens when we're moving and breathing in synchrony, right? So that was interesting. It was just a teachable moment. Sometimes teachable moments show up when circumstances are different, right? After that, went on to teach the intermediate class, which is a group of people who are really all over. And again, since I hadn't notified anyone of the time change, not everybody had figured that out. Anyway, we were probably 20 minutes into class when there was this huge cacophony down on Main Street. And I don't know how much you heard it for those of you who are on the call. Sometimes there's a car that'll come through with a bump and stereo system. There's actually this guy who has this amazing stereo on his motorcycle that sometimes comes through real early in the morning. I love him. He plays a lot of like classic rock. But this was a heavy metal out on Main and Liberty, that huge intersection. It's not huge, but it's busy. So I waited thinking that it would move on when the light changed, and it did not. It just kept going. So when the group was in Ustrasana, I just kept counting and moved out and looked down at Main Street to see what was going on. And there was this whole altercation going on. The snow had begun, and there was someone driving a very large dually black pickup truck with the loudest stereo ever and the windows open. And all these people on the curb on both sides of Main, like shouting at this guy. One guy was doing this, like with his hands over his ears. And he was just sitting there on Main, and then the sound continued to go all the way until Supta Vajrasana, when I just got up and moved my whole operation into the lobby. And even then, the sound of the heavy metal continued out on the street, probably until we were in Ekapada. So I don't know what we missed down there, but clearly we were not the only ones having an unusual day. Then the last thing that happened was that Rocket on the West Coast showed up for the proper time of class, and that was towards the tail end of lead intermediate, and so gave us an opportunity to just practice together. I stuck around and took intermediate together. with Rocket, and just got home myself as a result. So I mean, this morning I'm just reflecting on how much, again, the practice serves to create a plumb line in so many ways. That just like, okay, your mind is different today, your circumstances are different today. There's a lot of much more difficult material in my mind and in the world right now, it appears to me. And yet there's still this concentrating effect of the practice of it bringing us together. And if we know how to use it skillfully and alter it for the conditions, it can restabilize us. And yeah, I try not to talk about how much I love it, but this is one of those days when the gratitude is abundant. So I apologize for my errors. I hope you're all doing well, and thank you for writing this out with me.